Hello everyone, and thank you for replicating with me. If you haven't seen my last upload, I showed you the process in which I made my Archmage robes, and I'd love for you all to check it out, unless you're into a more armored attire. Anyway, this video, I made a form-fitting Khajiit mask to finish my Halloween costume. To start, I've left a link in the description for a great and simple tutorial for life casting your face. I was way too excited to film this process when I did it. LMX SFX Makeup, How to Create a Face Cast. I want this to feel like it's practically my own face, so I'm using about 3 packets of air-dry foam clay to create the closest shape of my Khajiit's face structure, trying to be minimal and not oversized. If you have a 3D printer or extra money, you can simply purchase realistic cat face masks on places like Etsy, but I did this for very detailed personalization. I want the closest thing to appearing to be a natural Khajiit as I can get. This method can also be used to create Argonian costumes as well. Once you're happy with that, I'd make the teeth. I used baking clay to sculpt. If you don't want your mask to have a working jaw, I'd skip to about the 2-minute mark. This step was truly very fun for me because I love when projects allow me to learn more information. I went through several reference photos to be sure my feline teeth appeared to have real anatomy to them. Now Khajiit seem to have improved throughout the Elder Scrolls games. I started with Skyrim, but if you followed an Oblivion style, I'd suggest more teeth and more jagged structure. To make sure these are going to fit in your face mask, I bit down on some paper and cut out where my mouth would comfortably sit and drew the border of my Khajiit's jaw so I could tell where to stop. Here is a good comparison between Oblivion and Skyrim, and an example of some great true-to-life photos you can find on Google. I sculpted the nose separately from the face because I plan to drape my fur, and I believe this will make painting and assembling the nose more seamless. To get a more realistic texture observing my own cat's nose, I gave it lots of lumps, almost like you're replicating sandpaper with high grit. I put holes where the nose sits because I want to be able to breathe and smell out of this. To make the molds for everything, I'd suggest a smooth cast 2-part liquid rubber. What I used here worked fine, and was what I had on hand while waiting for that product in the mail. I've done this in nearly every video I've uploaded now, but I really just love that particular brand over the one I'm using here. What's more is this cheaper Michaels molding product had to be weighed and only had a 3-minute mixing time period, which does make it harder to use. You can skip this step because we won't be using the foam, but I painted my war paint and macro lines to see how it would look later. Lacking materials, I continued in a weird order, creating the ears with craft wire and old used couch leather as a base. I want these to be able to move and flex, to fit in my robe hood and give expression. Using safety pins on corners helps me pull the leather through my sewing machine. I very much dislike hot glue because it lacks permanence. I don't want anything I make to lack quality in a short period of time. There are plenty of videos that use only hot glue, and it would be a good alternative if you don't have a sewing machine or sewing materials. But you will need them for this project. I used the sewing machine to create an inseam, added wire around it, and then had to hand sew around the wire to keep it in place. To give these fur, I used foam material and created an ear-shaped pocket template. Using an X-Acto knife will allow you to cut without ruining the hair around the edges. I read somewhere that Khajiit were modeled similarly to lynx or bobcat, which is super neat and allows me to make these eye patterns on the back of the ears. That's right, eyes on the back of your head, just like Mom's. I hand sewed these and left the bottoms open for attachment later. Now if you shave these especially short, my mistake won't matter, but Kat's hair grows upwards on the ears. I accidentally made mine lay downwards, but it blends in nicely and maybe Khajiit hair is different or something. Here, I'm removing the jaw from the face because I'm going to be molding the two separately. Here, I'm painting liquid plastic onto the foam first to smooth out any cracks, but this proved to be unnecessary as I did end up dremeling and sanding my cast later. Now using the better liquid rubber, I'm just pouring this over the two pieces. A better method would be to use Legos to build up a more fitting container, but I only have Tupperware, and I usually get around there being too much space using tape or cardboard. Whilst doing this, I ended up using all of my rubber, and in between layers, I did stick random things like extra rubber, cardboard wads, and hot glue to take up extra room. But if I were following this, I'd buy more rubber instead. To keep the top piece of the molds from adhering to themselves, I applied Vaseline to the inside of the mask and outside surfaces. Ideally, the second piece of your mold should be very solid so you don't have to finagle it while the plastic cures or do any sanding inside the mask. The 2-part liquid plastic I use is Smooth Cast 300, same brand, and is very lightweight. It has a 3-minute mixing life and a 10-minute cure time. It is my favorite. I noticed my first pour of the jaw had the tooth area leveled perfect for where I needed it. Because I'd already done the same process to create the teeth out of plastic, I poured more plastic and cured my lower teeth immediately to the jaw. I really didn't have enough rubber for the rest of the face to work, but what saved me in the pours was having a flat edge that lined up, but I sadly did need to sand a little bit inside near my eyes. Now, I truly destroyed this part of the mold by not using a mold release or Vaseline here, and you should, but I only planned to make one of these, so I didn't mind. I wish I had a garage, but oh well. I used a Dremel in my bathroom to sand and perfect this layer of the mask, and drilled holes along the side for spring hinges I purchased on Etsy. I don't film these Dremel segments only because my camera isn't very good as is, and I don't want to clog it with dust because I don't have a way to cover it. Here it is with the hinges attached. I use nuts and bolts, screwing the nuts on the outside so I may sand down the bolts to hide them and not constantly be jabbed in the face. I then used epoxy and even more liquid plastic to glue the hinges down as close as possible and to cover up what was left of the bolts. This blends everything together so well you'll be able to pet your cheeks later and feel nothing there at all. When covering the bolts, I also used a paintbrush to add spots of plastic that I wanted to even out and improve around the face. If you have the materials, I'd make your own eyes at home. These eyes I bought on Etsy are acrylic, which I don't have, and just printer paper on the back, which I didn't really like. I feel they were overpriced and they took over a month to get to me, so I won't mention the shop in case they usually try harder or ship faster. I don't want to ruin their reputation. I purchased them for this effect they give that looks like they follow you, and all of that said, they look great. But I really just needed to address that I didn't make these. I used strips of a vinyl black material to make real looking lids. This was a really good way I found to give an appearance of skin texture. I discovered a popular way of adding hair to foam costume heads is taping and mapping out seams and color changes. Then removing and flattening the tape against your material before cutting. I do think this works well and highly recommend it. At this point, I'd suggest placing your face within the mask, opening your mouth fully to measure how much extra material you'll need on the cheeks. I needed about 4 centimeters of extra space. You don't really need to shave the hair till it's adhered to the face. However, I did just to be sure I was lining all of my markings up correctly when I did. Before attaching the hair, I used my airbrush and tester's paints for the inside of the mouth and used a paintbrush for dry brushing the lighter overlayer of the cat's tongue. You don't need an airbrush for this step, I just think it blends the best. There are different materials often used for eyes, such as costume blackout eye mesh or nylon. You could even use something like semi-clear plastic and glasses. I use more of a fine netted material and epoxy because you can layer up for your own desired visibility. Since cats also have lips, I've added a folded layer of the same material used for the eyes around the mouth. I've added the black material here as a lining for the cheeks, about 4 centimeters. This does need to stretch with your hinges. It may also be a surprise for some to find that cats also have eyelashes. Thicker hairs acting to protect from debris, so I've epoxied some cheap lash extensions to the top of my lids. Per my own preference, I use liquid plastic to attach the eyes. I then made use of a $1 dog harness from the Goodwill and adhered it so I am able to glue it down at 5 points and buckle it taut to my head within the mask. This is how I'm able to give tension to the jaw without it being loose or discomforting. To apply the hair, I worked from the middle outwards using epoxy, being quick but cautious. There should be extra material on all borders for seam allowance to cover the back and neck. This section took me multiple hours, as the fastest curing epoxy I could find had a 1-minute mix life and a 1-hour curing time. To adhere the inside of the ears, I'm once again going back to liquid plastic for durability. I want to be able to bend these forever with no worries of disattachment. My Dovahkiin Khajiit has braided hair, so I parted and cut down center to sew a zipper. When the braids are in the hair, this will be covered wonderfully. I then sewed this to the hair that will cover behind the head and added to that the hair covering the neck. Mine isn't as form-fitted as it could be, however, I currently do like the mane-like appearance very much.
Oh yeah. It's all coming together.
I did consider adding lining to the inside, but because it's already warm on its own, I do believe sanitarily cleaning it will be easier without. Because this is faux fur, I felt a synthetic dye or plastic paint was what I should use. But you'd normally dye bath with synthetic dye, and where I live, Tester's paint has disappeared from the shelves. So, reluctantly, I used water-based color-shot acrylic paints. I told my husband I wanted this to be weather and waterproof. He said something to the effect of, "Are you planning on swimming in it?" And I thought, well, you can in Skyrim, but he's right, I'll live. I first outlined with a brush, then airbrushed for deepening layers. Again, you don't need the airbrush, but you will need to brush out the hair as you paint to stop the hair from drying clumpy or uneven. My airbrush didn't really agree with this paint, even as thinned, so I did have a slightly harder time with the back of the head where more paint was needed. Here, I'm airbrushing, then dry brushing the nose using very little paint. When you do this, be sure to keep your extra paint from drying out so you're able to blend this into the nostrils. I attached my nose with liquid plastic, so any extra runoff will need to be trimmed away and painted as well. For whiskers, you can either use faux whiskers, trim fishing line, or what I did. Use shredded whiskers from around the house. Only weird if you make it weird. I read whisker shedding is from stress, but if you examine my cat's face, he just grows even longer, fuller ones, and he's very content. Your cats are not chickens. Do not pluck their whiskers. To my right, I had a small puddle of epoxy I simply dipped the whiskers in and pushed them firmly against the upper lip. I braided my hair, and of course this is optional. You could even treat this like a game mod style and curl it if you like. Thank you all so very much for watching. I appreciate all of you watching, all of my lovely subscribers. Let me know if you enjoyed this content, and I hope that you'll all join me in replicating next time. Faux Fur, everyone!
Is that a bobcat?
Huh?
Hey, milk drinker. Never should have come here. Dragons. Skooma?
No! No! Am I hiding?
Yeah.